Hello everyone. So today I'm back with lecture number 11 of operating system, where today we are going to see what is Banker's algorithm. If you people remember, in lecture number 10, in the previous lecture, we have covered one of the major issues that an operating system can face, which is called the deadlocks. And I'm just going to give you a quick recap of the concept of deadlock, because in today's lecture, the algorithm that we are going to see is one of the technique which can be used for deadlock avoidance and prevention. So the condition of deadlock that we have seen in the last lecture was, that was an issue, and that was a problem that can be generated when two different processes are in a race of, grabbing a resource to get executed. Now, in such a condition, what will happen, that we are assuming that there are two processes where both of these processes are holding one resource at a particular moment, and they are in need of another resource which are grabbed by each other. So until one process sets free the resource, the other process won't be able to execute. So this condition, due to this condition, there is a problem which arises, and it is known as the deadlock. So whenever it is the case that your operating system gets affected by deadlock, it makes your system totally dumb. So it is always required that your system shouldn't enter deadlock condition. That is why what happens is, we used to have some kind of prevention measures, some kind of avoidance measures, so that the deadlock does not occur in your operating system. So in the last lecture, I told you how can you characterize a deadlock in an operating system. There were four special and mandatory conditions for a deadlock to occur in an operating system, and it is required that for a system to be affected by a deadlock, all these four conditions should be there at the same time. Even if a single condition is not present, we cannot say that there is a deadlock, right? So I've seen and I've explained how these conditions can occur and how can you characterize the deadlocks in a particular system. Now we are coming up with the next algorithm about deadlock, which is called the Banker's algorithm, and we are going to see that how we can prevent our system from going into a deadlock state. So quickly just see what are today's objective in this lecture, and then we'll move forward for the rest of the part. So for today's lecture, the objectives are that we are going to understand the algorithm, Banker's algorithm. Then we'll be knowing that how can we implement it with the help of numericals. With the help of numericals, I'm going to solve some of the numericals. I'm going to show you some of the numericals, how to solve it, because it will help you out in your main examinations as well. And with the help of this, we are going to understand that how this algorithm works. And lastly, we'll be seeing what all are the merits and the demerits of this algorithm. So students, the Banker algorithm is sometimes, it is referred to as the detection algorithm. Now, it is a resource allocation and deadlock avoidance algorithm. So do remember, it is a detection algorithm which is used to detect, if the deadlock has occurred in your system, it is the one which can detect it for you. And it is majorly a resource allocation and deadlock avoidance algorithm. By resource allocation, we mean that you people remember in the last lecture, I have explained you the resource allocation graph. Now, the resource allocation graph is the one which always shows you that how the processes are connected, how the resources are allocated to them, and how they are requesting the other resources. So it is a complete picture of your system processes, that how they are grabbing the resources, how the resources are allocated to them. So this is what the Banker algorithms does. It is a resource allocation algorithm which takes account of all the resources which are already available with the process, or they are in need of getting it. So it is one of the resource allocation, and together with that, it is obviously a deadlock avoidance algorithm. Why? Because when it is taking care of the account of the resources, obviously it won't let any process to go in that deadlock state. Once a process is in requirement of a resource, it will help the process out in grabbing the resources from by even preempting some processes which is grabbing it for a long time. So it is all the task of a banker's algorithm. Now, when we talk about the evolution of this banker's algorithm, it was actually developed by Dijkstra that tests for safety by simulating the allocation of predetermined maximum possible amount of all the resources, and then makes a safe state check to test for possible deadlock conditions for all other pending activities. Now, before deciding whether allocation should be allowed to continue or not, right? Now, the algorithm was developed in the design process for the operating system, and it is originally described in in Dutch. There is a document which is called EWT 108. It is described in that. So, when a new process enters a system, it must declare the maximum number of instances of each resource type that it may ever claim. Clearly, that number may not exceed the total number of resources in the system. So here in the slide, you can see I've written multiple instances. Now, understand this thing that, a process, what we are saying here is that for a process to get complete execution, we have seen this thing that it requires some resources. Like it could be anything, it could be memory space, it could be some input output signals or data or any kind of information. So for complete execution, the process is in requirement of all these things, right? Now, what happens is when a process wants to get executed or it enters a system, what happens is it is the first mandatory thing from the processor side that it should declare that total how many number of instances it requires for a particular resource. Let's say that we are talking about we are taking an example of memory space. Let's say my system has got only 100 MB memory, right? Only 100 megabytes of memory is the present situation or the present state of my system. Right. Now, let's say there is a process which is in requirement of 50 MB. I already have 100 MB left in my system, and a process comes which require 50 MB space. So in that condition, I would be able to, allow my process to take 50 MB from the 100 MB space. But let us assume there is a process which comes in and it requires or it asks or requests for memory space which is 150 MB. Now, is it possible to allot 150 MB? No, it's not. Even if it has asked for 100 MB, we would not be able to provide it total 100 MB memory space. Why? Because the total resource type that my system has is only 100 MB of instances of that particular memory. So, the claim that is done by a particular process for the complete resources cannot be done. This is a point where your banker's algorithm comes in and it checks that a process should not grab the whole resources which are, under the supervision or under the control of a system. So this is what we are saying, that when a process gets all its requested resources, it must return them in a finite amount of time because some other processes will be in need of gathering those resources. Now, how does our banker's algorithm work? Now, for the banker's algorithm to work, it needs to know three things. What are the three things it needs to know? First of all, how much of each resource each process could possibly request. That means how much maximum resources a process require. Like for example, a process to get complete execution, let's say there is a resource A1. So my process needs total 5 instances of A1 to get executed. So this is the maximum amount that it will require. 5 is the maximum amount that it is requiring, right? Now, second thing that your algorithm should know is how much of each resource each process is currently holding. That means that my process needs maximum 5 resources of A1. Total 5 resources it requires of A1. But let us assume that right now the total number of allocated resources to my process of A1 is 3. So, maximum it is requiring 5, but currently it is holding only 3 of it. So how much it is requiring next? Only the remaining part. 5 is already there. 3 is already allocated. So the 2 more resource instances it is requiring. It is in need of 2 more resources, right? So this is the second thing, that how much is allocated to a process already. Third thing is how much of each resource the system currently has available. Now the third point comes, where when we take an account of the total number of available resources of that particular instance, right? Like for example, as I told you that A1, A1 for a particular process, a process require total 5 instances of A1, right? 3 it already has, but it is in need of 2 more processes, 2 more resources at that time. So let us assume that those 2 resources are not available at this particular moment because they have been allocated to any other process. So in this case, there is no availability of these 2 processes. So this is the third point that your Banker's algorithm should know. So in summary, I can say there are 3 things your Banker's algorithm is in need. One is maximum amount of resource your process requires. Second, the total number of allocated resources at a particular point at the current state, how much resources has been allocated to your process. And third is the availability of the remaining resources, right? So these are the 3 things your Banker's algorithm will be requiring for implementation. Okay, now let's see, the next thing is, this is what we are doing here. You can see the algorithm, it will require these things, data structures, like n is the total number of processes, n is the number of resource type. So what is available? Vector of length m. If available, there are k instances of resource type rj, maximum n into m matrix. If max ij is equals to k, then the process pi may request at most k instances of resource type rj. And next is allocation, n into m matrix. If allocation ij is equals to k, then pi is currently allocated k instance of rj, right? So quickly we are going to see the next part. So see, the resources may be allocated to the process only if the amount of resources requested is less than or equal to the amount available. Obviously, as I told you, if I am having only 100 MB of memory, how can I give more than that or equal to that? I can only serve those requests which are requesting amount or the number of resources which are less than the available amount. So if somebody or if the process asks less than 100 memory, only in that condition I would be able to serve the request successfully. So this is one case that we have to keep this in mind. Otherwise the process waits until the resources are available. So some of the resources that are tracked in real-time systems are, it could be memory, could be semaphores and interface access. The Banker's algorithm basically derive its name from the fact that this algorithm could be used in a banking system to ensure that the bank does not run out of resources. Even the banking system works on this particular algorithm, or you can say vice versa, where the bank always keep track of how much fund it has got already and how much it can give to its customer as a loan. And even this is a thing that once a customer is done with the amount, is done with the loan, it has to give the or submit the interest from time to time. So this is the same case we are performing in deadlock condition also, right? Now because the bank would never allocate its money in such a way that it can no longer satisfy the needs of all its customers. Now by using the Banker's algorithm, the bank ensures that when customer requests money, the bank never leaves a safe state. If the customer's request does not cause the bank to leave a safe state, the cash will be allocated. Otherwise the customer must wait until some other customers deposit enough. Now basic data structures that we are requiring for this Banker's algorithm are, as I told you, the n be the number of processes in the system and m be the number of resources, then These all are the things that we are requiring. What are the available number of resources? So available number of resources can be taken up as an array, a vector of length m, which indicates that the number of available resources of each type, if available j is equals to k, then there are k instances of resources rj available. Similarly, we have second data structure that is called max, which is cross m matrix, which defines the maximum demand of each process. If max ij is equals to k, then pi may be may request at most k instances of resource type rj. Then we have allocation, an n cross m matrix which defines the number of resources of each type currently allocated to each process. Now, if allocation ij is equals to k, then the process pi is currently allocated k instances of resource type rj. And lastly, the matrix, the data structure that we need is the need matrix, which indicates the remaining resource need of each process. If need ij is equals to k, then pi may need k more instances of the resource type rj to complete the task. So here we have devised a formula which says that need ij is equals to maximum ij minus allocation ij, or simply you can say n is equals to m minus a. So simply what is the simple formula? Obviously, what is the simple formula? I told you earlier also. Like suppose the maximum number of resources that I need is 5. So here m is equals to max is equals to 5, and currently my process has got only 3 resources as allocation. So here the allocated part is 3. So how much more I need? So 5 minus 3, m minus a. 5 minus 3 is equals to 2. So in total I need 2 more resources to get executed. So this is a simple formula that you can apply. Need is equals to maximum minus allocated. So it will tell you how much more your process is in need of the resources. So here I'm just going to quickly show it to you. I'm just going to quickly show it to you. I'm just stopping the presentation here, and I'm showing you one numerical based on the following formula that we have seen. Let me quickly take you to that numerical. So I hope you are able to see this example here. See, here the first thing that you are seeing is total system resources. So we are assuming here you can see this A, B, C, D. I guess you are able to see this thing. Here you see A, B, C, D, total system resources. So what we are assuming is we have total number of 4 different resources. There is A resource, which is, total it is 6 in count with the system. The system has got total 6, instances of A resource. Then total 5 resources are there of the type B resource. Then for C type resource, we have in total 7 instances. And for the D resource, we have in total 6 resources, right? 6 count. So this is the total system resources. This is the account of total system resources that we have. So let us assume that if a process, request total 8 instances of A resource. So in that case, we cannot fulfill its request. Why? Because we have only 6 instances of this particular resource. This is why we sometimes deny the request. So this is one case. Then available system resources. So available is what? The system has, in total this much of resources. But because, the resources are never sitting idle, obviously they are allocated to the requesting processes. So let us assume that out of this, some of the resources are already allocated. So the remaining available system resources, the remaining resources are, see, for A, it was total number was 6, and out of which we have given 3 resources. So the remaining amount that is left is 3. So if there is a process which wants to have total 3 instances of A or less than 3, then this request can be granted because 3 is available. For A instance, for A resource, we have total number of 3 instances. Similarly, if you see here, total B resources, the total number of instances for B resource was 5, but currently it has only one available. 4 of its resources are already allocated to some other process. Similarly, for C, it has complete, it has total number of resources to be 7, but currently it has got only one, and we are assuming that 6 are already allocated to some other resource. Similarly, for D, we have total number of resources to be 6, but we have allotted total 4 resources somewhere, so we are currently left out with 2. So here, now in the next matrix that you are seeing, what we are doing, processes and currently allocated resources. Here the matrix that you are seeing is showing total number of processes that we have. Like suppose we have 3 processes here, P1, then P2, and then P3, right? And here we have 4 available resources, A, B, C, and D. So here it is showing you the current allocations for every process. Like, understand how it is giving. This is process number P1. So process number P1 is currently having 1 instance of A resource, 2 instances of B resource, again 2 instances of C resource, and 1 instance of D resource. So this particular line, this particular first row is representing the total number of allocations of different resources for P1 process. Similarly, let us come over to P2 part. What is happening here? In P2, we are assuming that total number of instances of A resource is 1. For B resource, it doesn't require anything. There is a 0 allocation. And for C and D, it has got 3 resources each. Similarly, for P3, there is 1 instance of A, then it has got 2 instances of B, 1 instance of C, and no instance is allocated of D, right? So this is the current situation of your process, current allocation that your processes are holding. So P1, P2, P3 are holding these much of resources of different resource type like A, B, and C and D. Now the next matrix that you are seeing here is of maximum resources. What does maximum resources mean here? For every process to get successfully executed, every process need a maximum amount of resources. Maximum amount means a particular number of resources of a particular, or a number of instances for a particular resource to get fully executed. So here it is showing that, see, P1 process require maximum 3 instances of A resource to get fully executed. And here see in this matrix, total available right now is 1. So it is in need of 2 more because it requires total 3 instances of A. But currently it is having only 1. Similarly, if you see, it requires total 3 instances of B, but currently it is having only 2. Similarly, for C, it requires total 2, and total 2 is already allocated to it. For C, it is done. Then for D, it requires total number of 2 resources, and here is the situation, only 1 is given to it. So for now, P1 is in requirement of 2 A instances, 1 B instance, and 1 D instance. C is already done. Similarly, you can see it for P2 as well. For P2, you can see here the currently allocated is 1, and maximum it is requiring only 1. So here it is, P2 is done with A resource. It does not require more of it. Then second one is C. The P2 hasn't got any resource type of B type, whereas it requires 2 complete resources. So right now it is in need of 2 B resources. Similarly, for P2, the availability of C resource is 3. Right now, 3 instances of a particular resource is already allocated to it, and obviously it requires only 3. So it is done with C as well. And finally, for P2, maximum of resource that it requires for D is 4, and however 3 is already allocated to it. So it requires only 1 more allocation. So this is the case where the availability is shown, that how much they are already holding and how much maximum they require to get executed. So now, as per our formula says that need is what? It is equals to the maximum resource minus the currently allocated resource. So here is the matrix. What we have done, simply we have subtracted maximum minus allocated. This matrix minus this matrix. So you get this resultant matrix in this case. This is the resultant matrix 2101. This 0 shows that your particular process doesn't require this resource. Like P1 does not require C. Does not require means it doesn't need, it has already been allocated with the required amount. Similarly, P2 doesn't require A and C, it is already done with it. Then P3 does not require A and D resource, it is already done. So this is the case. This is how you are going to solve the conditions. Okay. Now, how we can judge the safe and unsafe state from this algorithm? Now, a state, as we have seen the example, it is considered safe if it is possible for all the processes to finish executing. Now, since the system cannot know when a process will terminate or how many resources it will have requested by then, the system assumes that all the processes will eventually attempt to acquire their stated maximum resources and terminate soon afterwards. Now, this is a reasonable assumption in most the cases, since the system is not particularly concerned with how long each process runs, as at least not from a deadlock avoidance perspective. Also, if a process terminates without acquiring its maximum resources, it only makes it easier on the system. So, a safe state is considered to be the decision maker if it's going to process ready queue or not. Given the assumption, the algorithm determines if a state is safe by trying to find a hypothetical set of requests by the processes that would allow each to acquire its maximum resources and then terminate, returning its resources to the system. Now, any state where no such set exists is an unsafe state. Now, we can show that the state given in the previous example is a safe state by showing that it is possible for each process to acquire the maximum resources and then terminate. So, as I told you, if you remember that P1 needs two instances of A, one instance of B, and one instance of D, more resources for achieving its maximum. So, the system now has one A, no B, and one C and one D resource available. So P1 terminates, returning 3A, 3B, 2C, and 2D resource to the system. So now the available resources for the system is one for, it becomes 4, 3, 3, 3, like 4 for A, 3 for B, 3 for C, and 3 for D. So the system now has 4A, 3B, 3C, and 3D resource available. Now what will happen? P2 acquires 2B and 1D extra resources, then terminates, returning all its resources. So the system now has 5A, 3B, 6C, and 6D resources. Now P3 acquires 1B and 4C resource, and it will get terminated after this. So the system now has all the resources like 6A, 5B, 7C, and 6D. So because all the processes were able to terminate, this state is called safe state. For an example of an unsafe state, consider what would happen if the process 2 was holding 2 units of resource B at the beginning. So it won't be possible for that, right? So see, this is how you are going to identify the safe state, where the safe state means the deadlock would not happen, and unsafe state means there is a possibility of a system going into a deadlock condition. So how would you identify the safe state? In the safe state, what will happen is, as many number of processes you have, all of these processes will be able to execute successfully. They will be able to grab the required number of resources, and they will be able to successfully complete their execution. So if such kind of thing happens in your system, then you can say your system is in safe state. But if there is some kind of complexity in such kind of thing where your process is not getting the desired number of resources, there could be a possibility that your state is going to be in deadlock. So what I request here, that when the system receives a request of resources, what happens is it runs the banker's algorithm to determine if it is safe to grant the request. Now, the algorithm is fairly straightforward once the distinction between safe and unsafe state is understood.
Recording in progress. Reprocessor.
So the algorithm is fairly straightforward once the distinction between safe and unsafe state is understood. Now, question comes that can the request be granted? If not, the request is impossible and must either be denied or put on a waiting list. The second question comes, or the second step says, assume that the request is granted. Third, we say, is the new state safe? Now, if so, we can grant the request, and if not, either deny the request or put it on a waiting list. So whether the system denies or postpones any impossible or unsafe request is a decision specific to the operating system. Now let us again take an example starting in the same state as the previous example started in. Assume process 1 requests 2 units of resource C. Now there is not enough of resource C available to grant the request, so the request is denied. On the other hand, assume process 3 requests 1 unit of resource C. So there are enough resources to grant the request. So we are assuming the request is granted. So the new state of the system would be, the available resources would be 3. A will have 3 number of resources. The B resource will have 1 instance, C resource will have 0 instance, and D will have 2 instance. So, when we allocate all these things, we are determining if this new state is safe. So P1 can acquire 2A, 1B, and 1D resource and terminate. Then P2 can acquire 2 B resources and 1D resource, and it can also terminate. And finally, P3 can acquire 1 B resource and 3 C resources, and it can also terminate. Therefore, this new state is considered to be safe. Since the new state is safe, we can grant the request. So, this algorithm, basically the banker's algorithm, what does it do? It first of all check that while granting or after granting a particular number of resource to your requesting process, will the system remain in the safe state or not? If in case your algorithm identifies that after granting the request your system will remain in a safe state, only then your request is always granted, otherwise the request is denied. So this is an important point that we should keep in mind while working. So this is the algorithm that you can see, resource request algorithm. This request for process Pi, request I is equals to request vector for process Pi. Now if the request J is equals to K, then process Pi wants K instances of resource type Rj. So if the request I is less than the need I, we can go to step number 2, otherwise raise error condition since process has exceeded its maximum claim. As I told you, a process cannot request more than its need. So the request can be made up till need or less than need. So second says if the request is less than available, let's say the requested amount is less than the needed amount, then in that case we'll move to second step where first we have to see that whether the amount that you are requesting is currently available with the process or not. So in that case, we need to go for the third step. Otherwise P1 must wait since resources are not available. So in third step what we do, we pretend to allocate requested resources to Pi by modifying the state as follows with the help of these formula. What we are going to do is available minus request. Secondly, what we do is allocation plus request. So how many you have already got, how many resources you are already holding, plus the requested resources. So this is one case, and the third algorithm, the third formula that we are applying is need minus request. So what is the leftover? So if we are saying that if we are in a safe state, the resources are allocated to Pi, and if we say that no, the system is in unsafe state, then Pi must wait and the old resource allocation state is restored in that case. So this is one of the example of, again we are taking off Banker's algorithm here. So we are assuming that we have 5 processes P0 to P4. So here in the PPT you can see there are 5 processes P0 to P4. That means total count is 5. Then there are 3 resource type. We have total 3 resources A, B, and C. And in total, the system has got 10 instances of A, 5 instances of B, and 7 instances of C. Right. Now this is a current snapshot at a particular time where the total allocation is shown to you. Like for example, I'm giving you one example of P naught, where let's say the first process, that is P0, is currently allocated 0 instances of A. It doesn't have any instance of A. Then it has only 1 instance of B and 0 instance of C. Similarly, currently P1 is acquiring only 2 instances of A and 0 instances of B and C. So this is the allocation matrix. Now maximum matrix shows the total need, the total requirement of a particular process. So here you can see the first process, that is P0, currently it requires total instances of 7 of A and total 5 instances of B and total 3 instances of C. So how can you find out the need? You can find out the need by subtracting the total number of allocated from the maximum part. So it is completely in need of total 7 instances at this particular moment, and it requires total 4 instances of B because one is already allocated to it, and it requires complete 5 instances. So 5 minus 1, that is 4, and then it requires complete 3 resources. So this is the case that we have, and the last that you are seeing is the available part, which is showing that currently the system has got this much of resources available. So we can only make these availability. We can only grab these resources at a particular time. So in this condition, we need to decide that to which process we should allocate it first, so that they can be run completely and they can get out of it, out of the state, right? So do understand this thing, that you cannot allot the resources to a particular process in a continuous manner. So here you can see how many things we are requiring. Now this is the need. How did we find out the need? By subtracting allocation from the maximum matrix. So the system is in safe state since the sequence P1, P3, P4, P2 and P0 satisfy the safety criteria. Now how come we find out this safety sequence? See, uh, this safety sequence is find out by allocating some resources at a particular moment of time, so that one process get fully executed, and once the process get fully executed, it releases all of its resources. So the system gets back all the resources which is it has allotted to a particular process. So once it has got all the processes back, it can allocate these resources to some other processes. Like what happens here is, as you can see, the process P1 has first of all got all the resources which it has needed. Right now, once it has completed its execution, it is going to release all the remaining resources, all the resources which it is holding. So once the resources are released, now the system has allocated the required number of resources to P3 process to get full execution. So once P3 process gets fully executed, it will again, what will happen? It will release all the holded processes. So once again, what will happen? The system will get back all its resources. Then what will happen? It will again allocate the required number of resources to P4 process to get fully executed. Now again, when the process number 4 gets fully executed, it will again releases all the processes which it has already hold in the previous scenario. So again, like this, it will happen. And when we say that all these processes are successfully executed, we say that we have satisfied the criteria, and we can say that the system is in, now it is in the, currently it is in a safe state. So here you can see. Now these are the questions. If you're seeing this example, just try to answer these two questions. That can request for 330 by P4 be granted at this particular time, and can request for 020 by P0 process be granted at a particular time. As we have already seen how you can do that, quickly try to do this. So what will happen if we have single instance of each resource? Now in this case, we need to maintain a wait for graph where the nodes are processes, like from Pi to Pj, if Pi is waiting for a Pj process to grant the resources. So in this case, we can periodically invoke an algorithm that searches for a cycle in the graph. Now if there is a cycle, there exists a deadlock. Now, an algorithm to detect a cycle in a graph requires an order of n square operations, where n is the number of vertices in the graph. Similarly, here is the resource allocation graph, which we can use to show that how the resources are allocated and how the one process is waiting for another process to release the resources. This wait for graph you can see here. This is the wait for graph. According to this wait for graph, we have made the resource allocation graph, which is showing the complete picture that which process or which resource is particularly held by a current process. Like see, the resource R3 is currently grabbed by process P5, and P2 is in request of this R3. So once P5 is done with it, this is allocated to P2 process. So this is a complete picture of how they are working. Now, if there are several instances of a resource type, like we have seen single instance, now we are assuming that we have several instances of a resource type. How can we do that? We'll have these data structures like available, where we have a vector of length m, which indicates that the number of available resources of each type. Then we will have allocation matrix, which is n cross m, and it defines the number of resources of each type currently allocated to each process. Then we have request, which is again n cross m matrix, which indicates the current request of each process. So if request ij is equals to k, then the process pi is requiring k more instances of resources of type rj. at the end, we have seen this banker's algorithm. Now, what are the limitations here? Limitations, you can say, as in terms of, it will collectively take up the merits and the demerits of of this algorithm. So, like the other algorithms, the banker's algorithm has some limitations when implemented. Specifically, it needs to know how much of each resource a process could possibly request. In most systems, so in most of the system, this information is unavailable, making it impossible to implement the banker's algorithm. Also, it is very unrealistic to assume that the number of processes is static, since in most of the system the number of processes varies dynamically. We know this thing that they work out dynamically, so we don't know in advance that how many resources it will be requiring. Moreover, the requirement that a process will eventually release all its resources when the process terminates is sufficient for the correctness of the algorithm. However, it is not sufficient for a practical system. Waiting for hours or even for days for resources to be released is usually not acceptable. So this is all about the banker's algorithm that we have done today. Now, I hope you people were able to, understand what exactly this algorithm does. So I hope the deadlock concept and the concept related to finding out the safe and unsafe state using this banker's algorithm is already clear to you. Now, quickly, let me take you to the MCQ part of it, and I hope you'll be able to answer the MCQs. So here are some of the questions for you, MCQs. First is deadlock prevention scheme. It can be applied if the options are already there with you. You need to find out the answer. These are two set of questions that you need to first of all answer. There are three questions. For deadlock prevention, which of the following conditions stands true? The mutual exclusion condition must hold and wait hold, the no preemption condition, or the circular wait condition. So quickly try to answer all these questions. I hope you were able to answer all these three questions. Now, let me take you to next set of questions. This is question number 4. In deadlock prevention scheme, to ensure that the hold and wait condition never occurs in the system, if at least one resource must be non-shareable, then at least one resource must be shareable, or wherever a process requests a resources does not hold any other resources, or all of the above. Now, the fifth question says to ensure that the hold and wait condition never occurs in the system, which of the following protocol should be used? So, these are the protocols. Just quickly go through it. I hope you were able to answer these questions. Now let me take you to question number 6 and 7 here. To ensure that the hold and wait condition never occurs in the system, in deadlock prevention scheme, which of the following is the major disadvantage of the protocol used? Swapping, or you say the resource utilization may be low, or starvation, or a page fault condition. So it is very simple. We have already seen this thing. Let me take you to question number 7. The third necessary condition for deadlock is that there be no preemption of resources that have already been allocated. To ensure that this condition does not hold, which of the following protocol should be used? So each process to request and be allocated all its resources before it begin execution. We can implement this provision by requiring that the system calls requesting resources for a process precede all the other system calls or the remaining two. So quickly just read these questions and try to answer. Now, let me take you to the last two set of questions, question number 9 and question number 10. This is question number 9. Try to quickly solve it, because we have already seen the circular and wait condition. Now, this is the 10th question. Prevent deadlocks by limiting how requests can be made. The limits ensure that at least one of the necessary conditions for deadlock cannot occur. Possible side effects of preventing deadlocks by this method are low device utilization, reduced system throughput, starvation, or page fault. So I hope in today's lecture you were able to answer all the questions, and the theory and the concept that we have done is all understood by all of you. So keep on reading, and if you have any doubts, you can write down in the comment section so that we can resolve whatever people are facing regarding this particular topic. So keep reading and stay tuned.